Good afternoon, everybody. This is really a hardcore crowd. I got to say, I thought we'd come in here and there'd be about 20 people. So really, thank you for hanging in here. There's been a lot of great content, and we've got one great last panel. And I am pleased to call the last panel to order and introduce Representative Flores, who is chairman of the House, in the Florida House, K through 12 Appropriations. Very powerful position. She has worked in education as part of Governor Bush's staff, and now as a state legislator is really one of the leaders in the state. Terry?
Thank you, Kathleen, and thank you, all of you, for being here and for sticking around for the last panel and for what myself selfishly thinks will certainly be the very best panel. As Kathleen mentioned, my name is Anitere Flores. I'm the state representative for House District 114. That's portions of Southwest Miami-Dade County, and it has been an absolute pleasure for the last 2 days to get to know so many of you that are here in this room and really be able to come out of here energized and with some very specific goals on how we can continue in my state, Florida, to continue to make it better. And for so many of your states, I know you're going to go back and do the same thing. We welcome you to this last panel. Its official title is Florida's Formula for Student Achievement, a national model for closing the achievement gap. As a new mom, some of you may have heard that I'm a proud mom, 1-year-old son, baby Maximo. My goals, it's a life transforming thing to become a mother. And really from one day to the next, you start looking through the eyes of your child and you say, well, what do I want for my child? I want what all of you in this room, what all of us as parents and as Americans want. We want good quality education systems, good schools, so that our students and our children can go on to great colleges and go on to perform well in their careers and in their paths as they move forward in life. Unfortunately, as we know, too many of our students are growing up in schools where from the day that they are born, we've essentially sentenced them to a life of failure. And it's something that is absolutely unacceptable, and that's exactly what these last 2 days have been about. 10 years ago in Florida, we were one of those states. We were one of those states where we were at the bottom of almost every standardized exam. We were at the bottom of every standardized ranking. And we saw that less than half of our students read at grade level, less than half of our students were able to perform math at grade level, and we knew that something had to change. That change started to happen in 1998 with the election of Governor Bush and with the incredible reforms that he was able to propose and, more importantly, enact in his very first year in office. One of the great many Bushisms, there are several many for those of you that know him, but one of his very best that I steal many times is that success is never final. And oh man. Sometimes I'll be honest, sometimes I steal and I pretend I made it up myself. But you can't do it in front of him, obviously. But, that's the beautiful thing about this panel that you'll hear today, that what they're going to tell you about today is an incredible model of success that Florida has, but how even we in our state, that other people have now ranked us. 10 years later, we're a top 10 state according to Education Week. Even we know ourselves that success is never final. We can always do better. So sorry to one-up you, Governor. I'm very embarrassed now. We'll start off by introducing this panel. Over here to my left, of course, is our host for this summit, Governor Bush. He's going to be talking to us about some of the lessons that he learned as someone that has overhauled one of the nation's largest education systems. He's someone that, in my professional career, one of my highlights has been to work for Governor Bush in education policy in the executive branch, and then with him as part from the legislative branch as well. So we welcome him. We're very excited to have the Commissioner of Education with us, Commissioner Eric Smith from Florida, someone that is relatively new to Florida, and he has been there for the last couple of years and has been someone that has taken that torch of reform and is moving forward with it every single day, and he will share with us some of the issues on data systems, something that, as we've heard time and time again, is something that's absolutely crucial if we want to have this success. One over is Matthew Ladner with the Goldwater Institute, and he is going to share with us some of his research that he's done as he's compared successful systems, education systems from across the several states. And lastly, but certainly not least, we have Patricia Levesque. She is the executive director of the Foundation for Florida's Future. She was Governor Bush's former deputy chief of staff, also a former education policy chief, someone that's going to give us the nuts and bolts of exactly we went about this reform. And she's absolutely battle tested in not just the policy of education reform, but of the politics of education reform. And so with that, all of you, please stick around to the end. It's going to be an incredible panel. Thank you, Governor Bush. We'll start off with you.
Thank you, Terry. Thank you very much. Thanks for hanging out with us. No one's sleepy. Drink a cup of coffee. We're going to go through a PowerPoint presentation. By the way, the PowerPoint presentation is on a thing called a symposium, which is a fantastic product done by Smart Technologies, one of our great sponsors. Thank you very much. It's actually kind of a cool device if you're looking at technology. It looks pretty neat. So Patricia's going to do a PowerPoint presentation, but I thought I would give you 5 or 6 very quick. I'm going to try to do this in 2 or 3 minutes. Just lessons from trying stuff. One lesson is that if you don't measure, no one's going to believe you care. Measuring means that you have the courage of your convictions, because it doesn't always work immediately. It doesn't always work the way you want it to work. We live in a dynamic world. You can't predict what every outcome will be. But if you don't measure, people cynically and correctly so think that you're not convicted to your beliefs. And so if you're in the business of comprehensive reform, whether it's education or anything else, you better benchmark where you are when you start, and you better measure going forward. Eric's going to talk a lot about that because it's an important element of our reforms. Secondly, there needs to be consequences or accountability. There's no possible way, given human nature and common sense, that you're going to be successful unless there is a different consequence between excellence, improvement, mediocrity, and failure. You have to devise a system that rewards excellence and improvement and has a different consequence when you have chronic mediocrity or abject failure. The third thing is that human nature for us, because we want to be compassionate souls, is to lower standards so that all children can achieve. We want to achieve that idyllic lake, what's the name over in Minnesota? Lake Wobegon. We want to live in a place where every child is above average, and we're all above average because we're just special. The fact is that human nature responds the exact opposite way. You need to raise expectations because the capacity of human beings is spectacularly high, and particularly kids. My theory is kids are genius until they become socialized and act like us. And then they become kind of stupid and jealous and petty. But children, God has given a gift to, and you need to have the highest expectation of all of them. Don't assume that their life circumstances will impede their ability to be successful. And don't try to create one standard for one group out of a sense of false compassion, but have one lofty expectation. And the minute that expectation is reached, the first thing you got to do is raise the expectations again. So that would be the third suggestion. Fourth is, as you heard in my luncheon speech, I passionately believe that more choices will yield more innovation, will yield better results. That we are lovers of liberty, and through that love of liberty in a dynamic world, great changes, positive changes can happen that will far exceed anything that a top-down driven, static organization can achieve. In a dynamic world, we can always be above expectations because the interaction of people pursuing their own form of liberty will create more opportunity. So an abundance of choice, to use the milk analogy, is one that I think is important because it's a catalyst for faster reform. The fifth thing I would say is that you got to be in it for the long haul. The bigger the idea in policy, the longer it will take to take an intangible thought and turn it into reality, which means you got to have dogged determination. Winston Churchill comes to mind as the guy who, in the 20th century, was the person that I admired the most that just never gave in and never gave up. And when it looked tough, just redouble your efforts, because if you're on the right track, it's not going to be always moving forward. In a dynamic world, you go 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. But if you look at it over the long haul and you have determination, incredible things can happen. And the increments that may not be discernible each and every day that you make will become obvious if you measure over the long haul. And then finally, Annie Terry, the last element of this is that reform is truly never final, and success is never complete. So this is just this may be a theory of physics. The simple fact is, the minute you think you're finished and you stop, atrophy sets in and you start going backwards. You're either going forward or you're going backwards. You're either playing offense or you're playing defense. You're either on somebody else's agenda or you're on your own. And what we have seen in Florida is that the agenda may have started out kind of as mine, because I ran on most of the stuff that Patricia will talk about in the 98 campaign, but then it became ours. And a lot of the really good ideas were developed by people in the Department of Education. They were developed in the legislature, and it became kind of perpetual and became continual, because there was this notion that you need to build on the next platform of success you've created, or you're going to start heading back. So those are the lessons that are kind of hopefully commonsensical, that give you a sense that important things, you need to be strategic in how you approach them. I was blessed with a lot of really, really smart people. The final thing is to let everybody share in the glory. Let anybody that wants to come to participate in. Florida had 204,000 mentors, for example, to assure that third graders were reading. We know that because we measured, and then we created all sorts of wild and crazy ways to encourage their involvement. Take Stock in Children, Commissioner Pajic, is one of those, but we created all sorts of ways to get people into our schools. We won the Guinness Book of World Records for having a simultaneous book read, because reading was important. The way to be successful is to make it everybody's business in your state or in your community, and we tried our hardest to do that as well. It makes it a lot more fun, too. It's not just drudgery that way. Eric?
Very good. Thank you very much, Governor. Florida's a very special place. Those of you that heard Michelle Rhee speak this morning, she spoke about the importance of public education to individual children, and living in America, the importance of public education and the ability to give each and every one of our children an opportunity in life. The issues of equity, issues of fairness, issues of opportunity in our great country. And central to that is data. Data is a critical component in our ability as a nation, as a state, to be able to drive that home and to make sure that we have policies in place and practices in place and behaviors in place and recognition programs in place and research in place to be able to really drive that agenda that is so central to the American purpose of education. Florida started back in the mid-'80s working on a data system. Its purpose originally was really focused on some financial issues of how to best and equitably allocate resources and funds in the state of Florida. And that program that began to tie our funding structure to individual students matured and grew over time into a very sophisticated, very elaborate data warehouse system, data system in the state of Florida that I've been able to come back on my return to Florida after starting out as a classroom teacher there. My return to Florida have inherited and has just absolutely amazing capacity and capability. I've actually had commissioners from other states ask if they could license it, if they could buy time on it, and I'm trying to figure out how best to do that. If we can use it as a revenue source, it's going to be perfect. I just won't tell the legislature, I won't tell the legislature we're doing it. But
I'll take it away from you.
But it really is the envy of many. To give you an idea of how this works, we do have an individual identifier that we are able to keep private, but identify individual students as they are enrolled in our school districts and in our state. And we are able to travel along with them individually as they move through our school system, as they might move through other issues in their life, not just K-12, but charter schools or other kind of programs. See how they move through our system from school to school, as they transfer from one school to another, or a district within our state to another district. We're able to track them forward as they graduate, as they move on into community college or technical schools or universities in the state of Florida, and we're able to track them on forward into the workforce. So we can actually take students and work backwards to see where they came from, what experiences have they had, and what's the net result in terms of earning power. We can calculate their earning power and so forth as adults, and move on from there. The system is, again, extraordinarily broad. We draw information from 27 different state and national data sources, and that continually grows and expands as this data warehouse matures. But to give you an idea, we enacted in 2008 legislative session a high school accountability piece of legislation that evaluates our high schools not just on state testing, but also on other forms of college readiness and industry readiness, such as advanced placement, SAT, ACT, international baccalaureate, dual enrollment, and industry certification completion. And all those data sources from all those various entities all feed back into the data warehouse in Florida. So we get information from ACT and the College Board, and from our various community colleges around the state on dual enrollment, from the ACE program, and from 155 industry certification exam programs that are managed by a variety of organizations and associations across the country. All that data is fed back into the Florida Data Warehouse, and is able to turn around information on high school performance. So moving that data from a broad field of sources information, bring it back and give us a way to evaluate the performance of our high schools and so forth. It goes beyond that. And again, my portion is 7 minutes, but could be probably 2 hours if you guys would stay there with me and listen to it. But it goes beyond that. We wanted to see how our new teachers were doing that graduated from Florida institutions in their first year of teaching. And we've been able to, because it tracks individuals through K-12 and into the universities and out into the workforce, we can actually identify those teachers that, as you heard earlier at one of the earlier presentations yesterday, we can track our teachers and measure the learning gains for teachers that have graduated from our universities or alternative certification programs or whatever, determine their learning gains, and we can give a score back to any university, and we have done so, a score back to universities on the ability of their programs to produce teachers that have large learning gains or alternative certification programs. So the power of the data warehouse is truly as large as we choose to make it. It serves a critical purpose to us in issues of accountability and measuring progress for the state. It serves a critical role for the state in terms of policy development, policy evaluation, and also program review and program evaluation to see the efficacy of various programs and whether they're actually making the difference that we would hope they're making, and we're getting a return for investment on programs. It all comes back, though, to the ability within our state to have access to good, reliable data that can be put to multiple purposes. So. Patricia or Matt, turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. There we go. Let's go. Thanks for having me here today. I'm Matthew Ladner from Goldwater Institute, and actually what I have here on the screen is a study I co-authored with Vicki Murray from the Pacific Research Institute. It's called Demography is Not Destiny, and it starts with a story from a left-of-center think tank in Phoenix called the Morrison Institute. The Morrison Institute put out a report, a very good report, called Beat the Odds. And in Beat the Odds, the one of the authors went to an academic presentation and was doing a PowerPoint presentation like I'm about to do. And this person put up a map of the American Southwest, okay, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, points at his slide and says, this will be the Appalachia of the 21st century. Of course, there's this gasp from the audience. It's a pretty provocative thing to say. When asked to explain, he said, well, it's simple. Demography is destiny. All of these states have rapidly growing Hispanic populations. All of these states are now majority-minority K-12 in the K-12 demographics. What do we know about how Hispanics perform in school? Well, we know that the answer is quite poorly, right? On average, in urban centers in this country, half of Hispanics are dropping out of school. We know that if by NAEP data, that Hispanic students that are graduating, have the equivalent of an 8th grade education for Anglos, again on average, okay? We know that the rate of taking SAT and ACT scores is quite low. It's lower still to attend college, lower still to graduate. So basically what this person said is you do the math. This is what's coming. And the author of the report was in the audience, and she objected. And she said, sir, you're just doing a straight line projection of the past into the future. You're assuming that those of us who live in these states, like me and several of you out there, won't get our acts together. You're assuming we either cannot or will not get our acts together and do much better. And this demographer, he was this official state demographer from Kentucky, leans into the microphone and says, like I said, this will be the Appalachia of the 21st century. Well, I'm very happy to report to you that that's not true, or at least it need not be true, and the proof comes from Florida. I'm from Arizona. Florida and Arizona are broadly similar states. We both have a high percentage of free reduced lunch kids. We both have a majority-minority K-12 population. We spend approximately the same per pupil in our K-12 system, okay? And both Florida and Arizona and California and New Mexico, all these states used to be clustered near the bottom of the NAEP scores. Okay, now the NAEP is the nation's report card. It's a system of testing given to samples of students in all 50 states. It's the most reliable testing data we have. What you're looking at here is the critical 4th grade reading proficiency scores from the NAEP for Florida in 1998 and 2007. 1998, of course, was the year that Governor Bush was running for election. 2007 is the most recent available. Notice that there is a 32% increase in the percentage of kids scoring basic or better on the 4th grade reading test, right? This is really important, right? If you don't learn how to read early in your academic career, you're basically sunk. Notice also that these gains do not come at the expense of children at the higher proficiency levels, right? The percentage of proficient or better is even bigger, a 100% increase in those scoring at the advanced level. So, pop quiz. What do these states have in common? Anyone? Bueller?
That's new.
The answer is that in 2007, Florida's Hispanic students outscored the statewide average for all students in those states. Okay? This is a test given in English, mind you. Okay? Here's a map. We've got Florida down here. Hispanic students, 4th grade reading, average score 218. You can check out the scores of all these other states. I would especially direct you to that state. Oregon is a beautiful state. I don't know if anyone here is from Oregon. I've spent some time in Oregon. It's lovely. I've been to Portland. I saw nothing but wealthy white people the whole time I was there. Something's going on there. Okay, so the charts I'm about to show you is the same source of data, okay, but I'm going to show you the actual scores rather than the achievement levels, okay? And for your information, 10 NAEP points on this test means approximately a grade level's worth of learning. This is 4th grade reading scores comparing California, all students in California, okay, including all the kids in Beverly Hills and all those kids will be in the sample, compared to free and reduced lunch eligible Hispanics and free and reduced lunch eligible African Americans from Florida. Notice that back here in 1998, right, Florida's minority students were profoundly behind the average Californian, right? We're talking about, 2 grade levels approximately. But look over here. Somewhere around 2003, all right, Florida's Hispanics catch up to the statewide average, and by 2007, they have exceeded it. And mind you, these are free and reduced lunch eligible Hispanic students. The free and reduced lunch eligible African Americans are within shouting distance. Okay, they're within striking distance of the statewide average for all students in California. This is wonderful news. Here's another one. Florida's free and reduced lunch eligible students. Scale scores, we are comparing here all California students to only free and reduced lunch. So no ethnicities here, same story, right? Starts off, way behind. 2007, they're ahead. This one is middle and high income Californians. Okay, that's the blue line. Okay, basically I'm taking out all the free and reduced lunch eligible Californians. Okay, showing you their scores on fourth grade reading compared to all Florida students. This is incredible. Remember, about half of Florida students are free and reduced lunch eligible. This is basically doing the same chart the other way. Well, how will we do this if we compare, all California students to all, I need to speed ahead here. So basically, it's no comparison. I'll let Patricia cover this. This is what they did. Basically, it's a cocktail of top-down and bottom-up reforms. Very effective, obviously. Finally, one of the things we hear all the time in public education is we need more money. We need more money. Well, Governor Bush and Florida lawmakers and Patricia basically created a way for them to get more money, but they had to do it the old-fashioned way. They had to earn it. One Florida program provided financial incentives for students to pass AP exams. If you look at, this is for states that have a fairly sizable Hispanic population, passing, what are these, math, science, and English AP exams and getting a score high enough to pass out of college credit. Notice that Florida has the highest score, right? This is the highest in the nation. And my home state over here of Arizona, Florida has about 8 times as many Hispanic students passing AP exams as my state of Arizona. This is same data, basically looking at African Americans and Hispanics. Notice that the number of Hispanics and African Americans passing AP exams triples during this period. That's not bad. So what I like to tell people is that when it comes to education reform, I'll have what Florida's having. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matt. It's hard to follow when Harry met Sally, isn't it? A hard thing. I'm going to go through and tell you what we did, the roadmap for what Florida did to achieve these results, and hopefully I'll keep you awake while we're doing it. Governor, feel free to interject at any time. The slides on the screen now show you what took place before accountability and school choice in the state of Florida and what has occurred since accountability and school choice reforms. As Matt already said, in NAEP, we were at the bottom nationally in 4th and 8th grade reading and math. In 2007, the latest results, our 4th and 8th graders were above the national average in reading. Our 4th graders are now above the national average in math. Our 8th graders are 2 points away from beating the national average. An argument against accountability and reform and standards is that you're going to have less students graduating and more kids dropping out. Well, that didn't happen in Florida. In the 8-year period before we put our reforms in place, we had a decline. Our graduation rate declined by nearly 7% in an 8-year period. And yet, after we put in higher standards and reforms, we had an increase in our graduation rate by more than 15%. The same results occurred in dropout rates. And so, how did we do it? The cornerstones of our reform were pretty simple. High expectations, measurement and reporting, rewards and consequences, funding for success that we'll talk a lot about, and parental choice. For high expectations, I think Governor Bush has already covered this throughout the whole summit. We expected the same from all students, and we believed that every single student, regardless of race, color, income, can achieve a year's worth of knowledge in a year's time. And we tried to organize our system in a way that was focused on the student and holding the adults in the system accountable for that student learning. As Governor said, what gets measured gets done. In Florida, we have our state test is called the FCAT, the Florida Comprehensive Assessment Test. Before Governor Bush took office, we only tested students in 3 grades in 3 subjects. Now we test, as most states do, reading and math every single year in grades 3 through 10, and we test science and writing once at every grade school level, elementary, middle, and high school. Absolutely, Governor.
First big challenge, new guy gets in, great team, everybody's all excited. So where are we going to create the grade level? What's our expectation? Basically, level 2 is basic. It's below grade level because we established that grade level was the middle. We could have easily established level 2, which most states do, kind of basic being the level. It would have been easier, but then we would have raised, the bar would have been too low. And if you see the gains, principally is because we took a risk at the beginning because we had no clue how this was going to work out, to start with the bar raised higher and then raise it as you go forward. That is hugely important for anybody that's starting out on this. Don't underestimate the genius of kids.
Absolutely. As Governor pointed out, in our measurement system for students, level 3 is considered grade level. So when you hear some of our talk of results later on, keep these numbers in mind. Level 3 is grade level for students, 4 and 5 is above grade level, and 1 and 2 is below grade level. We use the data that Commissioner Smith talked about to drive 3 particular programs in our state: school grades, a promotion policy in 3rd grade, and high school graduation. So we grade our schools in Florida, but we started grading them way before strong accountability measures were put in place, and we used what I would call fuzzy descriptors that are probably being used in most of the states across our country. We called our schools high performing and low performing and critically low performing. And then we moved to a brilliant model where we called them levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you asked a parent of a student in our school system, did you want to be a level 1 school or did you want to be a level 5 school, no one could tell you what they wanted to be. And so one of the very simple changes that we put in place that made one of the most dramatic improvements in our system of student learning is we changed how we graded schools to an A, B, C, D, F scale. So parents immediately understood what that meant. Our school grades are completely based on student learning on our test. 50% is based on proficiency. So when you hear me talk about proficiency today, that means students achieving a grade level or higher according to our standards. And then 50% of our grade is based on progress. So the progress of little Johnny in 3rd grade compared to little Johnny in 4th grade, not the class of 4th graders one year compared to the class of 3rd graders the prior year. It's each individual student compared to himself or herself. Now, half of our progress measure looks at the performance of the lowest performing 25% in our state. Now, this was something very important in reform because every school has a lowest performing 25%. It doesn't matter if they're free and reduced price lunch, if they're students with disabilities, what race they are. Every school has a lowest performing 25%. And so making that a major factor in how we grade our schools ensures that the adults in the system pay attention to each and every child. We measure progress. When you hear me talk about progress, there are 3 ways students can make progress in Florida. One is very understandable. They move from performance level 3 to a performance level 4. They move up a performance level. Another way is if a student is grade level or higher, so let's say they're level 3 in 4th grade, and they remain grade level in 5th grade. We give credit to the school as making progress with that student. And then the last way, in these bottom 2 performance categories, since they're very big, we give credit to teachers and schools who move students up sufficiently within those lowest 2 performance levels. Now, this chart shows you very simply the 8 measures that we use to grade our schools. Each box is basically 100 points. So again, we look at proficiency or grade level performance. In reading, writing, math, and science, half the grade is based on grade level performance, half is based on progress. This is a sample school in Florida, Sunshine Middle School, and you can see that in Sunshine Middle School, 63% of the students are reading on grade level. And by doing this, the school gets 63 points. Reading down the column, you can see that 66% of the students in Sunshine Middle School made progress in reading. Doesn't matter if they're on grade level or not. They made progress. We give credit to the schools for making progress. And this is basically, you add up the points, and that's how you get the grade. This school is a 508 points. It's a B. What this type of grading system allows our principals to do is look and see that they did a fantastic job in writing. They got 90% out of 100. So whatever they're doing is working. They also see where they were struggling the most in science, they need to change what they're doing, whether it's more professional development for the science teachers or different curriculum or a different method of reaching those students. The principal has a guide path on what they need to do to improve performance. Once you get the number of points to be an A, B, C, D, or F school in our state, there are two other factors that come into play. The first is the percent of eligible students tested. Now, this provision was put in place. I think No Child Left Behind now requires it for all states to have a certain percent student tested. We had to put it in place in the state of Florida because the year we started using the FCAT, the year we started measuring how schools were doing, we had unfortunately, students being told stay home on test days, don't come on test days, and we had percent of students in some schools being tested drop to 70%. And so
we do this presentation around the country, and in order to be polite guests, we always say that this would never happen in Indiana. It only happens in Florida. But if you're interested in doing this, be careful.
Absolutely. The last factor that we look at is adequate progress of those lowest performing 25%. If you want to be an A school in the state of Florida, you have to make a specific level of progress with those students or you drop a letter grade. And that very simply is how we grade our schools at the elementary level, middle school level, and high school level. Until this year for high schools, as the commissioner mentioned, we are adding several other factors: graduation rates, at-risk student graduation rates, acceleration rates, which would be advanced placement, international baccalaureate, both the percent of students participating in those programs, and we look at the performance outcomes. This chart shows you a longitudinal look of how our schools are doing, and you can see in 1999, the first year that we started grading our schools, we had more D and F schools, that's the red line, than we did A and B schools. But look at the trajectory. Now, in the latest year of giving grades, we have 10 times as many A and B schools as we do D and F schools. And I want to point out the three dotted lines on the chart show you 3 points in time where we raised the bar. We made it more difficult to be an A or a B school in the state of Florida. And this is something that's really important. Governor Bush talks about when you set the bar, you have to set it at a level where it's still attainable, where people can still see it. You can't have complete failure when you set the bar, but then you raise the bar. You continue to raise the bar over time. This is a different chart to show you the history of the number of F schools in our state. So again, the first year we graded schools, we had 76 F schools in the state. We continued to have progress until in 2000 we had 0 schools. And so what did we do? We raised the bar. When you raise the bar, we did in that first year have an increase in the number of failing schools in the state, but then we adjust, and then there's always a decline after you raise the bar in the number of F schools in the state. Now I have this dotted bar, blue arrow here. We didn't raise the bar that year, but we did have an increase in the number of F schools the following year. What happened? We used to have, we didn't grade our alternative schools in the state of Florida. Alternative schools were previously where you sent the students that were going to be expelled from the school system because of behavior problems. Until we started noticing some of our high schools were creating alternative schools on their campus just to put the low performers. So we started grading the alternative schools, and that was the increase in the bump that next year. Now, what happened when we started grading schools A, B, C, D, F? There were several things that occurred that from a practical perspective. First, this command focus on student learning. And I have to tell this story that in 2005, Governor, I think it was, when we were reading the newspaper, the Leon County School Board, that's the school board in which Tallahassee, the state capital, is. We have 2 state universities. It's the seat of state government. It's a very well-educated community. when we looked at the public agenda for the school board meeting, and they weren't having their whole agenda focused on rezoning or different process issues. But one of their board agenda items was, now that we don't have any DNF schools, how do we get rid of the C schools? How will we become the first district in the state that has no C schools? Ladies and gentlemen, that would have not occurred if we had called C schools satisfactory. No school board would be rushing to make sure we have no more satisfactory schools in our district. So the grade and the label makes a real difference in focusing adults in the system on learning. Media and public attention. Now, every year, back to school editions don't just show the inserts in the newspaper what the bus route time zones and the bus route pickups are. The newspapers cover the grade of the school and the learning that is taking place in that school, so every adult knows before their child steps foot in the door what the grade of the school is, how are they doing, how are they focused on student learning. I can continue to go through some of these things. I'll focus on community support, schools that we knew that were struggling for years and years and years and years. When they got that F label, what happened was a surrounding of the community to put more resources in that school. Governor Bush tells a story about a school in Orlando that was consistently failing, and what that F letter grade did was it brought alumni back that used to be very proud of that school to invest time and resources and mentoring into that school system. So that letter grade of A, B, C, D, F makes a real difference. The second thing that we did with the data was we ended social promotion in the third grade. Up until third grade, students are still learning how to read. When they hit fourth grade, they then have to read their subject matter in order to learn. And so we set a policy that said if a student did not score or scored at the lowest level, the very lowest level on our state test, they had to be retained in third grade unless they met some good cause exemptions. And those good cause exemptions were things such as if the teacher could show through a portfolio of work that the student was on grade level, the student could be promoted. So the control was still in the teacher's hands, but the trigger was the data, the objective data. This chart shows you, the first column, the percent of students reading at the lowest level in third grade. And look at 2000-2001. We had 29% of our third graders reading at the lowest performing level, and we were retaining less than 3%. So we were knowingly moving forward 26% of our third graders that we were dooming to failure because they couldn't read their subject matter. The first year we put in place the retention policy, you can see we had 23% of our third graders who were reading at the lowest level, and we retained 13%. Let me tell you, this was tough. Retaining 13% of the third graders in your state was a tough policy, but look at the results. All the way down the line, you can see that every year we have had a decrease in the percent of students in third grade who cannot read, and we, as a result, have had a decrease in the percent of students that we have had to retain. One of the things that started occurring was districts started intervening earlier. They started making sure that they didn't promote a student from kindergarten to first grade or first grade to second grade if they couldn't read, so that they were prepared for third grade. The third way we used higher expectations, and the data was in high school graduation. We had an exit exam for 25 years in the state of Florida. It was an 8th grade level test. Students got 5 opportunities to pass the exam, and in the last year it was given, we had 10% of our students could not get a diploma because they couldn't pass the 8th grade level test. What we ended up doing was raising the bar from an 8th grade level test to a 10th grade test, and we now have fewer students that are not getting their diploma because of this new standard. So you raise the bar, students will rise to meet the challenge. Rewards and consequences. Now that you grade schools, what do you do with the results? One of the things we needed to put in place was a reward system. So our policy says if a school improves a letter grade from an F to a D to a C, C to a B, B to an A, they get reward money. $100 per student. Right now, because of budget issues, it's $75 per student. That money goes directly to the principals, the teachers, and the parents in the school, and they determine how to spend the money. Historically, more than 85% of those funds have gone to staff bonuses, and it's a community decision on what happens with those funds. We also had to put in consequences for results. So we put in place a policy that said any student assigned to a school that received its second F in a 4-year period, they got other options. They were able to choose a higher performing public school in their district, in an adjacent district, or in a private school. The funding level was whatever they would have generated in the public school system or whatever the private school tuition was, whichever was less. And we had 753 students participating in the private school voucher portion of that until 2006. We're going to talk a little bit more about this program in a bit. Funding for success. One of the things that Governor Bush and the Florida legislature did was they started to look at what we call in our funding formula categoricals. We had categoricals or pots of money like summer school that our districts could only access if they actually failed with the student all throughout the school year. The only way they could earn summer school funding was to have kids sitting in a seat in summer school. And we wanted to change that paradigm. So we took many categoricals like summer school and dropout prevention, combined them into one, and gave the money to the districts up front and said, you have flexibility in the use of these funds. Ultimately, you have flexibility. The first things we want you to do with the money are help your DNF schools, help those students struggling in 3rd grade, and help the students who can't graduate from high school. You come up with creative ways to do it. And so what did our school districts do? Instead of keeping kids all the way and waiting until summer school, they started offering Saturday morning sessions and after-school tutorials and bring in a clerical assistant to help the teacher so the teacher's freed up during the school year to do more teaching. After they finish using the funds for all the purposes we need them to, then they get flexibility to use the money on anything they want to, like general pay raises. Incentivizing rigor. Most of what you've heard about focused on getting kids to grade level or making sure the low performers were achieving, but we wanted to make sure we were getting kids on a path towards higher rigor and higher success. So we started giving free PSATs to all 10th graders in the state. And then what did we do with that data? We used a tool from the College Board called AP Potential that helps us identify the students that are ready for success in college credit courses.
Patricia, can I add something here?
Absolutely.
Because of the data-driven nature of all this, and at least in Florida, the school districts provide the money for the practice SATs. They don't have to. They do. Sometimes they do. You know,
they did.
They didn't, because we can tell we knew that the A and B schools, 85% of the kids took the practice SAT. The DNF schools, 15% did. So the system, particularly in these, we have bigger school districts. So the system is designed to accept the fact that if you go to an underperforming school, you're an underperforming student. There are these subtle forms of discrimination, basically, that exist in systemically that this kind of shattered. So we said, okay, we'll pay for it. It's not that much. It was a pretty cheap date. It was like $1.5 million for the whole state. Every kid gets it now. The school districts aren't burdened with that cost. And that was the first step in a series of things done with the College Board.
And probably one of the most cost-effective use of our resources, because for a very small investment in the PSAT tests and in the professional development, we now have been able to identify and encourage all of those students who could succeed into taking those courses. The other thing that we did was we had for years a bonus to our schools if they got a student to pass an exam. The schools got a $700 bonus. This was created a long time ago. We said, let's just take $50 of that school bonus and push it down to the teacher. And these are the results. In the period of time before we started this partnership with the College Board, before we started giving the free PSAT tests and encouraging students in, we had a trajectory that was showing improvement. But once we started encouraging all of those students who got identified as being eligible, Once we started pushing the bonuses down to the teacher, look at the increase in the number of students taking AP in the state of Florida. And it wasn't just taking the test, it was passing the test. We saw huge increases. I don't have slides here to show you, but our African American and Hispanic student increases in taking the test and passing the test for African American students, a 450% increase. It was tremendous. Our African American and Hispanic students now lead the country in taking and passing AP tests in a very, very short period of time with a very small investment of funds. Opportunities for success also included the quality of the individuals that we brought into the classroom. Prior to 2002, the only way you could teach in the state of Florida was graduating with a degree from one of our colleges of education or going back to college and taking 20 credits of pedagogy. After 2002, we did some things. We did full reciprocity. We would accept state certificates from other states. We would accept national board and American board certification. We started letting our community colleges compete with the universities in offering education degrees to those individuals that already had a degree but wanted to change their career. We let our districts offer alternative certification, on-the-job training while they had people in the classroom. We let, believe it or not, college professors who were teaching algebra at the college level. It was a novel idea to say, why don't you teach at the high school level as well? And you don't have to go through this long, rigorous process of certification. We also encouraged our universities to start offering education minors so people could get a degree in a subject area major and minor in education. And now I should probably say a greater percentage of teachers in the state of Florida every year that we hire come through alternative routes to certification. Parental choice. We have a wide variety of parental choice in the state, and we'll walk through each of them very quickly. Opportunity scholarships. This was the voucher for students who were in a school that received its second F in a 4-year period. We had tons of researchers from the Manhattan Institute, Cornell, and Harvard look at similar D schools. So D schools, economically and academically similar, some that had no Fs in their background, some that had 1 F in their background, so that the second F triggered vouchers. And the research was conclusive that the threat of the voucher increased student performance. The Friedman Foundation did some research. The blue bars show you the statistically significant greater increase in student learning that occurred at those D schools where there was a threat of a voucher. Then what happened in 2006, the Florida Supreme Court ruled the private school option unconstitutional, and then you can see absolutely zero statistical difference between those D schools. So vouchers will increase the student learning of the schools, the students that remain in the public school system. They've been studied in the state of Florida, and the research is conclusive. We have McKay scholarships for students with disabilities. All of the 500,000 students with disabilities in our state are eligible to go to a public or private school of their choice. We only have 22,000 students taking the voucher, less than 4% eligible. But what has occurred because of the McKay scholarship? We have greater parental satisfaction of the parents who took the voucher and are at a private school, of the parents who stayed in the public school system just because they know they have the option, and of the parents who took the voucher and then decided to remove their students and come back to the public school system. They all have greater parental satisfaction. There's been more research done on the improvement of the student learning at the public schools, and also less diagnosing of students with mild level disabilities when there were a lot of private schools nearby who could take those students with disabilities via a voucher. We have a robust tax credit scholarship program that has about 22,000 students enrolled. They are all free and reduced price lunch, and research has been very clear on how much that program has saved money and the student learning that is occurring with those tax credit scholarships. We also had growth in our charter schools. We had to do many things to increase this growth, everything from removing caps that we had on charter schools to allowing the State Board of Education basically to be an alternate authorizer. So if an applicant goes to the district level, gets refused for their charter school, they can appeal up to our state board, and the state board can either affirm the school board's decision or reverse it. And I would say in about 50% of the time they affirm, 50% they reverse the school board's decision. Virtual education, Florida has the Florida Virtual School. It is the largest online learning institution in the country, 134,000 course enrollments. Public, private, and home education students get to take one course or all of their courses for free on the Florida Virtual School. We have two K-8 virtual school programs also. Students enroll full-time. And then we just started a new program called District Virtual Instruction Programs, and it's just starting this school year, so we'll see the results. And hopefully we can apply some of the policy and the lessons learned from our lunch panel to even improve our virtual school law next year. And then finally, we have a voluntary pre-K voucher program. It is the largest voucher program in the country. 140,000 of our 4-year-olds get to choose public and private options for pre-K. 85% of them choose a private option. 22% of those private options are faith-based. And what we do in Florida is when our kindergartners enter the system, we measure whether or not they are ready based on early learning or literacy. Can they identify letters and sounds? And you can see that in the year when we implemented the choice portion of voluntary pre-K, we started seeing increases in the number of our kindergartners who were better able to recognize letters and fewer of them who were not able to recognize those letters. That's a quick synopsis of the Florida formula. I'm going to summarize with just a couple of charts on results. This is a chart on our elementary student FCAT performance in reading. So you can see the blue line shows the percent of students who are reading on grade level or higher. We had 54%, a woeful number of our elementary students who could read on grade level. That percent is now at 72%. It's an incredible increase in a very short period of time. Middle school student performance. You can see what we're very proud of. We had 48% of our students reading on grade level in middle school a few years ago. Now it's at 62%. We haven't gotten exactly where we need to be, but we're going in the right direction. But I want to show you something. Look at how the performance for several years was basically flat. And I have to tell you, I worked for Governor Bush in the last 4 years of administration. Every year we do an announcement on how our students were performing on the FCAT, and every year in middle school it was flat. It was flat. It was so disheartening. And then finally in his last year we saw this tremendous increase in student performance, and we asked the educators what happened. And they said, for years our middle schools were receiving students out of elementary that were not prepared for middle school level work. So if you look back at this, in 2000, which is the first year that I would call them the Bush babies that entered under accountability. Let's go back.
That's old. That's a lot of babies.
That were entering kindergarten. Probably shouldn't use that term. 2001, they were in first grade. In 2002, they were in second grade, third, fourth, fifth, sixth grade. Look at that. The first year that students entered in kindergarten under a strong system of accountability, the first year they entered middle school, we started seeing increases in middle school student performance. The same thing occurred at the high school level. The first year the students entered ninth grade was really the first year we started seeing results in high school. Now, we're still not where we should be. We're only at 42% of our high school students reading on grade level, but that's better. Look at where we were before. We had more students who couldn't read, who were illiterate in high school than we did who could read. Yes, Commissioner.
This is the slide I called it. And I had nothing to do with this. But this to me is the Nobel Peace Prize, slide. Am I right? Look at that. Look at the blue line The blue line is 3, 4, and 5. Remember the grading scale, 3, 4, and 5. You're proficient or above. That little red line, which is way up there, is not level 2 and level 1. That's level 1. And back in those early days, 2000, talk about political courage, there were more kids scoring at the level 1 level than there were level 3, 4, or 5 combined. But that year out there, and I unfortunately, with the way things get covered, there was no huge celebration that I heard of down in Florida, but there should have been in that 05, 06 year when those lines crossed and more kids were performing at the proficient level and were level 1, and that line has not dropped back. It has continued to move on up. It's absolutely stunning transformation of an educational enterprise, state enterprise that has been moved because of this accountability model. It's fantastic.
So
anyway.
here's our challenge, because those are crappy numbers, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
They're improving, which is always better, and it's a long haul. And the Bush babies now apparently they're drinking and they're driving a car, and they're their real parents' worst nightmare, I think. So then the challenge is, well, how do our reforms they work, but then in high school something happens. So the critics of accountability would say, well, the first complaint is the cut scores are too high. That's the first. It's some kind of data deal we got it wrong. So the argument is lower the cut scores to make our numbers look better. Now I'm the old guy, so my opinion doesn't matter as much. But if someone walked into my office and said in any level on anything to lower anything, I would kick them out and I would shout obscenities at them. And I think hopefully that's kind of a systemic thing in the state. But so the challenge is, how do we get 11th and 12th graders into our accountability system, because they're not, and how do we deal with this challenge? This is a microcosm of the country, not just Florida. I mean, high school, something happens. And there's a lot of great ideas out there, but I think that's one of our great challenges. And the grading system that Eric and the legislature are working on will help in that regard, because it gets more students involved. But it's aligning our standards to college readiness and career readiness is really where there's huge work to do. If we did that as a country today, based on the experts, we would have about a third of our kids, 30% maybe of our kids, that would be ready to go to college in America. That's sad.
I'm going to make this my last slide. It's one of the ones that I'm really proud of, and that's our NAEP performance, which you saw several of Matt Ladner's slides. But each bar represents a year of administration of the national test, and it represents the percent of similar students that our students outperformed. So I'm going to have you look at the third section of columns for African American students. In 1998, our African American students outperformed only 17% of their peers, and by 2007, our African American students were outperforming 73% of their peers. The same thing occurred with Hispanic students, and overall, and our white students have made tremendous increases as well. We're one of only 3 states in the country identified by Secretary Duncan as having begun to narrow the achievement gap between white and black students in reading and math. And this is how we did it. And it's available. It's a formula that can be copied, and we hope it is, and multiplied state by state. So Governor and Commissioner Smith, if you want to return to the stage, and we can take questions.
Is this in? Well done, Patricia. In her spare time, she's a great mother of how old now?
16 months.
16-month child, runs this foundation, knows more about education than anybody I know, so.
Thank you.
I'm stealing this.
That is an amazing story, and I was lucky to be part of it for about 3 years. And I tell you, it is laser-like focus from an executive that did not stop every day. He had A+ meetings every week. So for those of you that are in other states and try to say, how does this happen? it was his top priority. And for all of us that were sort of on the sideways or sidewinders, it just never got off the agenda. Never, ever, ever, ever. And that's what drives results like that. First question, Governor Bush, what would be next for you in terms of social promotion? Are there other grades that should apply to?
Well, if you were going to think the old way, I guess the next likely gate would be 8th grade to 9th grade. We kind of have a no social promotion policy effectively by default in high school, since if kids don't learn, the no social promotion policy is they don't get a job, they can't go to college, they can't do squat. So, but I think we need to move to a totally different system that's not based on grades, it's based on what you learn, and you learn at a different pace. You may socialize amongst kids your age, but you could be more advanced. Go to this mass customized model, in which case you would have social promotion, a no social promotion policy in every grade, because you wouldn't go to the next level until you accomplished what you were supposed to accomplish at the level that you're on. So effectively, you could eliminate the whole social promotion debate if you customize learning and said every child will move when they've completed what our expectations are for their work. The Pedge Emelson idea of 36 modules for a course in a class, he has a no social promotion policy. They don't go to the next grade until they complete it. That's kind of what we need to, I think, ultimately get to, so you eliminate the idea of seat time being the dominant feature for passing for all but a small percentage of kids that may not be able to, they may be able to achieve some things, but they may not be able to reach the grade level because of, learning disabilities of some kind that are quite severe. That, to me, is the next step.
Anybody else on the panel before we go to the audience for questions? Questions?
Mike Jungbauer, State Senator in Minnesota. When I'm looking at all this data, you can see that it's a long-term commitment, and that seems to be the hardest thing in Minnesota. We've done alternative compensation, and the unions are always arguing if you don't see this instant, within 2 to 3 years, something great coming out of it. How do you convince people to make that long-term commitment to this change?
Well,
be bullheaded.
Exactly. I'm not supposed to say these things because it's all supposed to be so natural and organic and kind of happen. There are times where you just don't care if you're convicted to your beliefs, you care about what people think, but bullheadedness is not is the flip side, I guess, of determination. I don't know. I mean, if you know it's going to work because human nature is such and common sense, you're confident in it, and you have confidence in the team's implementation, which I always did. I just said, let's weather the storm. Those numbers, those middle school numbers were always ugly because the press and I had an interesting relationship, and that's back when there was a press, and they were pretty robust and interested, and they loved it because we were so data driven. They loved to use the data to see what a schmo you are, and so it was difficult, but we just fought through it. And the long-term things are harder in politics because it's a short-term business, and I don't have an answer to that other than encourage people in public life to be aspirational and big and bold, and then it kind of becomes a contagion that other people jump on.
If I could add to that, I think when Governor Bush was in office, and every year I'd have to stand next to him during these rollouts, and it would hurt. The elementary student performance was increasing, and the middle school performance was flat, but all we could do is rely on his dogged determination. What you all can do in your state is say, Florida did it. Florida did it, and it took this long, so we have to be patient. But we know that if you do these things, these are the results that you can achieve. So if you want to do these things in your state, use our story, and we'll help you tell it. We'll come over there, and Governor Bush will testify in your legislative committees even to help you make some of those reforms happen.
We had the other thing I would say is that tactically, it was a fight every week. We tried to win every week. I mean, literally, it's like a campaign. You campaign. Sometimes candidates campaign Other times a suite of ideas are the candidate, and you run a campaign around them. And tactics matter, and we try to put a human face on this. So, I mean, literally, I can tell you this because the Department of Education and Patricia figured out, and other people figured out, that we have 225 or 223,354 kids that are grade level readers now that otherwise wouldn't be. And then we would do our press conferences where we'd roll this stuff out, and we would have actually a kid that was we had a kid who, you all have the state test, and everybody hates the state test. We had a kid from Miami who was a level 1 reader, and he wrote a poem called "The Extraordinary F-Cat," and it started out like, "The Extraordinary F-Cat." That's how he started this poem. He was kind of a kid that was not confident, and he was a below basic reader, and he did this poem, and so we put him in the State of the Union, the state address, on a video, and he gave this poem, and then I got to say in my address that the school went from a D to an A, Bentry Elementary, I still remember it, and this kid became a grade level reader because of these intervention strategies that didn't exist before accountability. And so the kid gets up, in the second floor of the Capitol building, and everybody stands up, all the legislators stand up and give him a standing ovation. I mean, that kid's probably going to run for governor now because he got that chance. So we putting a human context on it to make it more joyful and less dreary, and make it real for people, because these numbers are meaningful, but they're just numbers. I mean, behind every one of those numbers, there's a lot of people that benefit.
And I would say, I'll just add my little comment up here, build your accolators. I mean, I think Michelle Rhee gave some very good, always bring it back to the kids. If you're focused on the kids, and you ask the question like she asked of that principal or parents,
I love that.
There's really no other answer than to keep going forward with the reform approach.
I wish I'd heard that like about 8 years ago. What a great story.
If I could add one thing that I forgot to mention on this particular slide that shows the number of schools in our state that are A or B, you have to look at the data and look at it in different ways, because one of the arguments of one particular superintendent in the state against the whole accountability system is it's biased against poor students and poor schools and minority students. And so you have to take a look at the data, and when you look at this 2,317 schools that are A or B, more than 1,100 of those schools are primarily minority and primarily free and reduced price lunch schools. We have schools in our state that are 100% low income, 100% minority, that are making A's. That's the stories that we should be upholding. Take those principles and let's replicate what they're doing.
We have another question?
Yes. Good afternoon. I'm Diane Hutcherson, and I'm with one of the 31 early learning coalitions in Florida. And we look at the voluntary pre-K programs, that one of the extraordinary programs that Governor Bush was able to put into place. But one of the things that happened with VPK is that in Florida, we changed our whole vocabulary. We no longer talk just about K-12 or K-16 or K-20. We're now talking about birth to 20. And that is a phenomenal change that's happened in the state of Florida. And I'm wondering if the panelists could comment on how much just changing the vocabulary of the state and focusing on that birth to 5 as part of the true educational system has made a difference in these results.
I think it matters just because you want to create a culture of lifetime learning. So the early years matter, and so do the years after learning. That ought to be continuous. The one thing I like, because I'm a data nerd, is that we actually assess kids from 4 to 5. So when the first week or second week, teachers have tools, a new tool now developed by the department itself that assesses where the kid starts. So if you have meaningful accountability, like for 3rd grade, a no social promotion policy, you better start working on it when a kid shows up in kindergarten. And now, because of the quality work of the pre-K programs, early literacy can start even earlier. So you don't have to worry about no social promotion if you really are focusing earlier and earlier, because then strategies can be developed to keep them going.
I would say also it has changed, at least even under my tenure. the nature of the Department of Education. I think we're very fortunate in Florida that under the Department of Education we don't deal with just K through 12, but pre-K through state colleges, community college work, and so all under one roof we have a continuum of pre-K through 20, which is a huge plus in my view. We have everybody at the table. As my chairman, Chairman Fair, reminds me constantly, we're talking about developing a seamless curriculum, a seamless program for our students as they come in as 4-year-olds, as pre-kindergartners, and move on up in their readiness. So it's more than just simply changing the language, it's changing the way we think about children.
Next question.
Yes, Peggy Ladner, Ohio House of Representatives. Governor, your statistics are remarkable. I'm curious as to how your critics, whether they're political, educators, unions, or et cetera, deal with these numbers, and what do they attribute the changes to?
They're either they think denial is a river in Africa, or
Egypt.
I mean, they're in denial, some. We were in Indiana and we did this deal, and the guy on the committee, a Democrat, one of the articles I remember said he was skeptical. He sat and listened, for an hour and a half. It's kind of hard to be it's kind of hard to deny the fact there's been rising student achievement, at least. But he was, rather than to admit it and say, gosh, interesting idea, let's steal some of this, he said, I have to learn more. Well, you ready for another hour and a half PowerPoint presentation? I mean, politics is politics, and given my last name and given my well-known status as a Republican, there are people who will never be supportive, and that's just the way it is. And Republicans have the same problem a lot of times with Democrats. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is important to do is to give credit where credit's due. So I give credit to Barack Obama, President Obama, and to Secretary Duncan when they're doing the right thing. Why do we have to? We can fight about a bunch of other things. There's a long list. If there's agreement, don't fight. Find common ground. But then don't give up on your convictions. So we tried that, and thanks to the work of people outside of our, John Kirtley, who runs the Corporate Tax Scholarship Program, and his team, a majority of African American legislators support the Corporate Tax Scholarship Program in Florida. The work's never final. You just got to keep trying to build coalitions, but accept the fact that if you're aspiring to be popular, that's a waste of time. And if you're aspiring for 100% consensus on provocative ideas, that ain't going to happen. You're looking for enough of a consensus to create sustainability.
Next.
Yes, on your pre-K, voluntary pre-K program, I have 3 questions. Number 1, Senator from Missouri, I apologize, Jane Cunningham.
Hey, Jane.
As you look at what percentage of the people do take it? I assume voluntary means you leave that up to the parents. Is it an all-day program? And are there any thoughts of giving the materials to parents who really are not ready for their children to leave home yet?
Well, what you could do is Susan, why don't you turn around and shake hands with the senator? Susan ran the program when I was one of our great team members. So I may not have all these statistics right, so someone on the panel or Susan will tell you when I get it wrong. I think it's about 60% now, participation rate. Wow, I'm impressed with myself. It's a half-day program, but a lot of people were participating, we're paying for all the day, but the state pays for a half-day. Mm-hmm. As I said, we do the assessment, we measure how the kids are doing when they come in, and you can tell by type of pre-K facility how kids are prepared to go to kindergarten. Information for parents.
We didn't even get into the specifics. We grade the pre-K providers. So we actually look at how they prepare students. Are they developmentally ready, and are they ready with literacy? And then we grade our pre-K providers so parents, because it's a full voucher program, have information to decide which program they're going to participate in. The ones making the children ready, preparing them, and the ones that aren't.
So in terms of parent participation, Susan, you want to step up and, how to inform parents?
Well, actually, it's very engaged with the parents because it is a voluntary program. So from the beginning, they actually will choose which provider they want to use. So again, back to Patricia's point, we actually grade them so that they have some way of discerning which ones are good for their child. Also, we have our curriculums that are available also, and anybody can download those and use those as well in your state as well.
You may want to mention, why don't you mention the Readiness Coalitions too, which is a more outreach-oriented kind of way of organizing.
Yeah, we have a school readiness coalition that we had actually before we started the voluntary pre-kindergarten program. And actually that is, again, another mechanism that we use in conjunction with the federal government to make sure that we have children that are ready, prepared when they go to school the first day. And I think that between the school readiness and the voluntary pre-kindergarten, they have a good start. And then once we get them in school, we do what Patricia's been working on.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ira Paul, Independent Voices for Better Education. I don't really have a question. I have some comments and observations.
Well, if you don't have a question, you're going to have to be kicked out because
Rick
Hess won't let you speak.
Okay, anyway.
Okay, go ahead.
I lived through
the end of the day.
A++ plan and A+ plan from its inception, and I've been very supportive of it as a teacher. And I remember when the first recognition money was supposed to be issued, the teachers union in Pinellas County threatened a lawsuit because they didn't think it was fair for some teachers to get paid while other teachers didn't get paid. But the teachers, I don't know of one teacher who's turned down the money and everything, so the lawsuit never materialized. And I know everybody in my profession was thankful when we got a chance to get the extra recognition money and also the lead money, which no governor in Florida's history has ever done that for teachers before.
It's an interesting thing. This is $100 per student can add up. You know, if you have 2,000 students, what's that? 200,000? So straight to the school, no strings attached, no bureaucracy, wire transferred on the day that the commissioner announces it. It goes right in, and the school advisory committee gets to decide how the money's spent. As was mentioned, roughly 85% of it goes to bonuses for teachers and personnel on the school campus. What's interesting is that is how, if you asked Randy Weigarten or any teacher union leader, how would you structure a performance bonus system for teachers, that's how they would do it. They would say, create a school objective, it's all collective, the school achieves whatever the expectations are, then all teachers should benefit. It's a more collectivist approach rather than individualizing the learning. And so it's still opposed by the union because
#1 target every year to get killed.
Because people realize it's a critical element of accountability, that there needs to be rewards for success. If you just lower expectations to, everybody's above average basically, then the union is kind of where they like to be, which is they want to negotiate collectively against people who are all equal, and it all kind of it doesn't relate to students and teachers. So this is a very powerful tool, and the legislature would always feel compelled, or I don't know if this happens in other states, but sometimes when the governor is a little overbearing, the legislature, to get his attention, would threaten to take away the thing that was most important to him or her. This particular case, they knew that this was the most important thing to protect. And it always cost, a bridge or something, but it worked out in the end. Everybody got what they wanted. And it's an important element of this. And it does go to the teachers. So it's a form of a bonus plan, maybe the largest bonus plan, probably is the largest bonus plan in the country.
Last question.
Hello, my name is Francisco Souza. I'm from Portugal, and I'm actually here because you were in Lisbon 3 years ago, and you presented your reform, and I was so amazed. The Bush name wasn't so well.
It's coming back. Don't worry.
Beloved. But really, I was so amazed that I went to the U.S. Embassy and I said we have to follow up on this, and we had Patricia Levesque in Portugal, and she presented these amazing results. Unfortunately, at least my organization hasn't been doing well enough, so change is taking its time. But now we've been challenged to design a roadmap for reform by some businessmen and some leaders. And we're going to base that on the reform that you've done in Florida. So I really have a straight yes or no question. That is, when we present this in Lisbon, can we count on you to be there and to show your results so that finally maybe we have a leader that does something like this in Portugal?
Can we do it in the spring or summer?
Absolutely.
Yes, maybe. No, it's very flattering, to be honest with you, that anybody would emulate parts of what we've done. There are a lot of other great ideas that we didn't do that we wanted to steal from other people that are doing reform as well. We're certainly not the only place where reform is taking place, but to have that kind of impact, potential impact in Portugal, is flattering for all of us, and we're delighted you're here. We really are.
And I would just reaffirm that the foundation is here as a resource, and they're happy to come visit and share the story. And sometimes when you have an example of a project being done, it takes away the fear of some of the questioning in your localities. And so they have done a tremendous job of sort of assimilating a lot of data. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that went into that data. And there's a lot of people that are very proud of having been a participant in it. And it was one man's vision and one man's diligent focus. I mean, I could tell one story.
Can I disagree, Madam Chief of Staff? We created the structure. The teaching takes place in the classroom by teachers, and they're led by principals and by leaders like Mary Ellen, who's been sitting patiently the whole 2.5 days, who's the superintendent of, how big is the school district? I forgot. 8th largest in the country. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. And while there was some resistance, what I found was that the real leaders rose to the top, and they embraced this because they saw the potential for improvement, and they made things better, and it kind of encouraged them to be innovative. So we just created kind of the format, the playing ground for a lot of really fantastic people to do fantastic work. And you guys should do the same or build on your successes that you're working on so that they can do the same in your state.